polling when to Dugald, if the polls are to be trusted, Dugald, the Liberal National Coalition is quite likely to be on the opposition benches after March 25. Labor's currently leading in the latest Roy Morgan voter polls by a 52 to 48% margin. So if the current government is returned, can you guarantee that you'll keep your job in that? And will perhaps New South Wales have another change of minister? We've had a lot of ministers over the last couple of days, and last decade. And why should you keep your job?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and g'day everyone. Nice to be here with you in this salubrious room today, and thanks for the opportunity to be here with Mick. Look, I think polls you can take as many ways as you want. I take polls with a grain of salt, to be perfectly honest. I'm on the ground. I'm a local member, so I represent the seat of Dubbo, as you mentioned. I'm a local member. I know the pulse of my community. I'm also out and about in regional New South Wales, and I know the pulse in regional New South Wales as well. I'm feeling confident with the position that the coalition is in. But at the same time, you can't ever take anything for granted. You have to work hard. You have to prove what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that counts. People know when you're being truthful. People know when you're rolling out the BS. And my number one thing is, my door is always open and I will always tell you what I think truthfully. And I think that's a good mantra to live by. If re-elected, when re-elected, hopefully, absolutely. I would love to be in this role again. This is, to be honest, the best job I've ever had in my life. I love what I do. I love the people I get to work with. I love the people I get to represent. I can't guarantee what would happen, but I would like to think that the role, as I've been in it for the last year, has even changed. Things always change in this sort of landscape. Things have changed. We've had biosecurity threats that have been imagined for many years, but have now been realised. That's been a hugely challenging scenario, but with support of amazing staff and departments, we have proven to respond, I think, the best that any jurisdiction in the world ever has. So I would like to think that I would be in that role, and I'd love to keep doing that role because of all the things I've just mentioned. So I'm looking forward to that.
No worries. Mick, I think the question everyone in the room is probably wondering is, will Mick Veitch actually be in Parliament after March 25th? After all those years in the wings as a potential Ag Minister, you've been dealt what is deemed a rather unwinnable spot on Labor's upper house ballot ticket. Why are you still Shadow Minister, and who's going to be the Ag Minister if the opposition moves into government?
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for the question. Can I, it's nice to have Dugald here to soothe the knives that are in my back. Look, after a very traumatic hiccup to my political career back in October, I decided I would contest at number 9, and there's a couple of reasons. As I've said previously, I went away and spoke to the person on our side who won at number 9 last time in 2007. I had a good conversation with myself because that was me. So you can get up at number 9. Anyway, the conversation, we both agreed that we would contest at number 9. And essentially, after I'd made the decision, Chris has made it very clear that if we attain government and I get up, I will be the minister. Everyone in this room, this is my second one of these debates or conversations, and I'd like to achieve a third, if I could, next time around being the minister. So I want to be the Minister for Primary Industries. Just so you know, I think it should be called Primary Industries, not Minister for Agriculture. That's not a slight on Dugald. I just think if you look at what Dugald has as part of his responsibilities, that legislative responsibility, that is the old primary industries portfolio, essentially, and I think we should be the ministers for primary industry. I want to be the minister for primary industries. The best way to make sure, for anyone in the room that wants to know, the best way to make sure that I'm going to get there is that you have to vote below the line in the upper house. You vote 1 on the number for my name, number 9 on the ticket. So vote 1 for Mick Veitch, and you've got a number 15 squares to make it a formal vote.
And seriously, Andrew, though, one of the greatest risks, and I'm going to say this openly and honestly, Mick and I get on really well. And I think as a minister and as a shadow, we've achieved a lot this year because of the fact that we get on well. And in politics, relationships do matter. Having a good shadow minister is actually really important. The greatest fear I have is that Mick isn't there in opposition and that it's somebody else, like a Penny Sharp or a Rose Jackson. So You know, that's the concerning thing, because there is no one else who'll represent regional or primary industries like Mick will.
Well, I just was going to ask Mick, and if you're not there, who's going to have the ag portfolio?
Oh, look, that would be a matter for the leader, Chris, to
Who would you like to see have the
well,
ag
I'm
portfolio?
not sure if people are aware, but Steve Wan's put his hand up for the seat of Monero this morning, so
He's still got to win it yet.
Blast from the past.
there may well be someone else in the room if I'm not there. Look, it'll be up to Chris. And there are a number of people on our show who actually come off a farm. I mean, it's easy to say that Labor Party are all Sydney-based, but, you know, the member for Granville grew up on a sheep farm at Canoundra, and Mum and Dad's still there. The member for Blue Mountains grew up on a sheep farm at Humula. So, like, Greg Warren come from the hometown of the minister from Dubbo.
You're not going to say he'd be ag minister.
I don't know. I reckon he wouldn't mind. But anyway...
I know Greg well. I'm joking.
So there's a number of people. There's a number of options in the room.
And Steve Wan may well have some qualifications too if he gets over the line.
Who knows? It's an election. I agree with the minister. Like the poll, people talk about polling, and this is an old cliche in politics, but it is actually so true. There is only one poll that matters, and it's the poll that is taken in the last day in March. That's the one that matters, and that's when you'll have clarity around what it looks like afterwards. It is the only accurate poll that we should look at.
That's fair enough. Mick, while you've still got the microphone, as a former shearer, you must be very aware, and you live in the bush, you live up at Tumut now, but very aware of the danger the wool industry and the sheep industry generally is feeling because of the serious lack of workers in shearing sheds, and the cost involved in getting workers onto farms. Producers are, waiting months past their usual shearing times to get shearing teams, which often include a lot of semi-skilled or part-timers. Pay rates for shearing now are typically well above the award. You might be getting, you might be paying as a wool grower $9.50 a head cash. You're not meant to talk about that, but you might be. I know some people who paid $14 plus GST just to get the wages, just to get people through the gate. So despite all the advances in ag tech, you can't really shear a sheep with an iPhone. So I'm just sort of wondering, what will you be doing in government, should Labor get there, to get more people trained and working in the wool industry and other vital livestock welfare roles?
Yeah, look, so the first thing, Andrew, is I, if not elected, will not be going back shearing. So I'm not going to put myself up as one
Good money, Mick, good money.
I'm not one of the solutions for me. And my back every morning reminds me as to why I won't be doing that. It's a very good question. I think COVID highlighted just, I guess, the lack of workers we had in New South Wales and Australia, really. Not just in the shearing industry, but also for fruit picking and contract harvesting and things like that. So I think there's a general issue around workforce in the agricultural sector. Now, to get to shearing, you're right, and you can run TAFE courses for shearers, but you can learn to shear a sheep in a week, but that doesn't make you a shearer, by the way. That doesn't pay the mortgage. Doesn't pay the bills. There's a lot more that goes into being a shearer than 3 or 4 days at a TAFE course. Having said that, we have got to find ways to attract more people. Now the money, and all jokes aside, the money it's quite good, as you say, at the moment. But we still aren't attracting enough people to shear sheep. We've got to work out why that is. Rouseabouts, wool classes. I'm not sure how many sheds these days have shearers' cooks. Most of the sheds I were at, we had shearers' cooks. You can see that I ate rather freely over night time. So there's a range of workers that need to go into this. What are we going to do? Well, we relied heavily on the Kiwis previously.
That's right.
And as I understand it, they're actually, some have started to come back, but they sort of haven't come back in the same numbers, but they are sort of coming back.
So we need a sort of a better equipped local labour force, though, don't we?
We do. We've got to work on that. Now, all jokes aside about the training, that is actually the critical part. And often it's the kids that come off the land that will make the shearers, because they've actually grown up around shearing sheds and they've seen the work and they understand how hard it is and what to do in the shearing sheds. There's a culture around shearing sheds as well, and life of the in the shearing sheds. It just makes it easier if if the young country kids are doing that work. Having said that, there's no reason why city kids can't come out and experience that as well. And I think we've got to do a bit of work around encouraging our city cousins to come out and enjoy life in the regions, make a dollar, contribute to our local economies, and maybe they'll stay.
Dougal, have you got a...
Yeah,
what's your plan? How are you going to fix the wool industry?
I'm going to expand even further than wool. I mean, we've got a program now called AgSkilled, which targets industry and government traineeships and opportunities. And currently we're running that through mostly grains and cropping, but it's partnerships with significant industry players, and that is important. So when industry has skin in the game as well as government, you get really good outcomes. So part of my next plan, so we've got an AgSkill 2.0, part of my next plan is to actually uplift again and include more into that, including livestock. So I'll have more to say on that in the not too distant future, but this is something industry has been calling for a long time. Creating pathways, creating opportunities. It's not just one avenue, it's several avenues for several industries, and that's what we need. You need to be able to talk to the industry in a meaningful way about how you'll support them as government, not pay them to do everything, but we need to incentivise people to be part of that scenario. Industry wants more people, whether it's wool, whether it's horticulture, whether it's beef. Everyone wants more people in their industry. We can incentivise, enable, and through programs like our AgSkilled program, we will keep doing that. And I can tell you the opportunity there for future training that hasn't really been thought of in the same way previously is there. And I believe wool, sheep in general, will be one of the beneficiaries of that. And when I talk to people who are looking at, we've got some amazing shearers around my region, including Indigenous teams that have just been in New Zealand competing on the international level. There are kids that do want to get into this. We've got an opportunity to uplift them with the right training, with the right support, and that's certainly what we'll be doing.
Can I just say, so the Minister talks about the right support. He's correct. Mentoring is actually critical right now. If you want to encourage people to come into these industries, you can't sort of just drop them in. You do need to provide mentorship. Country kids often rely on their mum and dad or people they know because that's where they've grown up. But if you're going to bring other people into the sector, either from the city or elsewhere, I think mentorship is actually one of the supports that we do need to look at, and how that would be rolled out, and
government support for encouraging that sort of thing.
Yeah. And
we also need federal government support, to be honest.
When
we're talking about
this is a
schemes,
state election. We don't want to push.
No, but if we're talking about workforce and training opportunities, we do need Mick to talk to his mates in the federal Labor government to talk about other schemes than just the PALM scheme, which is around Pacific Islanders. And some of those placements have been ideal, but we need more skilled and unskilled workers from other parts of the world to help enable our workforce in Australia. And that is a federal issue that we can absolutely work on, and we do constantly around state solutions, but we do need federal support.
Right, no, that's fair enough. First question from the floor comes from Jamie Brown from the Land newspaper.
This is a question for Dugald. With so many competing demands for agricultural farmland from energy and urban development and conservation overlays, what will you do to allay fears from farmers that their farming enterprises remain viable?
Thanks, Jamie. Look, obviously, in the last 9 to 10 months or so, the Agricultural Commissioner, Darryl Quinlivan, has been tasked with the role of actually coming up with some solutions, some plans, some ideas around land use conflict specifically to do with large-scale renewables. His report on land use conflict in general came out just before I came into the role. It's been released publicly for quite some time. But part of that looks at a farm practice panel, which Darryl, we've actually spoken to recently. Darryl's agreed to be a part of chairing that, which will guarantee existing usage of land. So if you're a blueberry farmer, a potato farmer, a shearer, a wheat farmer, whatever you are, and you're meeting specific conditions that are recognised for that industry, that will be there as a recognised activity. We want to take away, again, the ability for councils in certain circumstances to red tape things and over green tape things. So part of the farm practice panel will be having industry involved, setting the guidelines of exactly what industry looks like in that region, and then having a very clear guideline on what that means for urban encroachment or changes of LEPs and that sort of thing. On the renewables side of things, again, the Ag Commissioner is due to be releasing a report fairly shortly. I've got some very clear messaging around what I expect to be delivering in the future as the Minister, and that is around support for landowners and also clear guidelines for proponents. Part of that will be around having the ability, if you are anywhere near a large-scale renewable energy area or zone, to know that there is a person there to help you. So a regional coordinator would be something I would love to see. I'd also love to see disrupted land, mine land, that's set aside for rehabilitation currently. I'd like to see us ramp up the usage of that as part of our scheme to make sure that people are used to where mines have been. People are used to that being disrupted land. Let's utilise that to its highest potential. There are always, 330 kV lines running past there, and people are used to the disruption there. Other things around fire insurance, risk insurance, we are already starting to work on that, along with pest and weed management in large-scale renewables, which is a concern. And the very first part of this is a template, an absolute standard contract that everyone will know. It'll be published. It has all of the inclusions that would be as part of any standard renewable project, including decommissioning. So I'm fairly clear on what I think needs to happen to support landowners and give clarity to proponents. And I'm fairly confident that that'll be backed up by the Ag Commissioner's report, and we'll be looking at taking forward some really clear recommendations around that.
Okay, thank you. Any further to add on that one, Mick?
Yeah, look, back in 2019, I sat up here with Niall and I spoke about the fact that if elected, we would bring in an independent statutory agriculture commissioner, which would look at land use conflicts. It was sort of one step further than the government's agriculture commissioner. That's still our policy. We're still going to do that in government. I am keen to see the latest report from Darryl. I think that's going to inform a lot for whoever gets in government. So that work that Darryl's doing should not be wasted. But the Minister knows, because we both spent a fair bit of time travelling country New South Wales, either in cars or in aeroplanes, and wherever you go, someone will talk to you about a land use conflict, whether it's urban encroachment, whether it's issues with power line corridors, or the renewable sector or whatever. People will talk to you about land use conflict. We've got to find a way. It doesn't matter who's in government. We've got to find a way through this, because the agriculture sector requires surety, and landholders require surety as well, and they need a mechanism upon which to provide that.
Great. Next question.
My name's Bev de Brincat. I'm current chair of Greater Sydney Landcare, and I'm here with Turlo, who's the Landcare New South Wales CEO, and we represent about 60,000 land carers around New South Wales, and for every dollar invested with land care, we deliver about another $3 or $4, so quite a good return. So the question is, what are you gentlemen going to do for land care if you get elected?
Look, Landcare, I've got some fantastic groups in my patch of the world. I was actually part of a workshop in Dubbo the other day with Mid-Lachlan, and a really great gathering on some of the ways that Landcare wants to extend itself and make differences in different areas. And what I said to that group, and it's a fairly common question I'm asked by every Landcarer I run into, is what are you doing? To start off with, Landcare is one of the most important community assets that we have, and the people and the volunteers that are involved in it, along with the hard-working staff. It has been funded and well funded because it is so important. So my guarantee is it will be funded going forward. What I don't want to see, and I'll be interested to see how Mick feels about this as well, is I don't actually think Landcare should be a political football, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean it won't be funded. It will 100% be funded by us if we're returned. I don't want to see it turned into a political football, because it's one of those things that's too important and should be considered separately. So I'm hoping Mick feels the same way. Land carers and land care across New South Wales make a significant contribution and will always have my support.
Just so you know, like, I'm a pretty strong supporter of land care, and for a while there, Turlo, I thought he was working in my office. He was there so often. But but all jokes aside, I agree with the Minister. Landcare is just such an important contributor to all of our communities right across New South Wales. And it's just not planting trees. Like, people forget about Beach Watch and there are other elements to Landcare and Ozfish, the work that they're doing. So I can guarantee there will be funding. I agree with the Minister. It shouldn't be political. The size of the envelope, I think the Minister and I are probably trying to work through our own processes to work out what that looks like. But I can guarantee that we will have some money as well. Like, you will be funded. What it looks like, let's see. Can I just say the other thing that I've flagged with my side of politics, and I'm not sure about the Minister, but I just think Landcare, the cycle upon which you are funded, is an interesting one. You sort of run out in the election year, and it puts you in a difficult situation. You almost become beholden to the political process. If we're elected, I'd really like to talk to you about how we can adjust that so that's not the case, because I actually don't think it's healthy. If we all support Landcare, I just don't think that's a healthy process.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of those things sort of come up in an election cycle, which is unfortunate. So I think that's an important thing to do as well.
Sorry, got a question over here.
Annabelle Johnson, New South Wales Farmers. My question's about biosecurity. Again, one that we don't want to see as a political football, and one that I know that you're both passionate about. So we saw an increase in funding to respond to the increased threat. Will you commit to keeping that increased level as the ongoing level?
Yeah. Look, Annabelle, thanks for the question. Yeah, and I think everyone knows my views about biosecurity and weeds and pests. I go on about it a lot, probably too much. So my views are well known. I have said in public forums previously, with the ministers being present, that whatever money the government puts on the table for biosecurity, we support. Like, that is, I don't think biosecurity should be an argument. I think it's actually too critical for the New South Wales economy not to sort of have a bipartisan approach to it. So my view is, whatever money the minister puts on the table, we're matching.
And look, as you know, Annabelle, we held the first ever New South Wales Biosecurity Conference in Dubbo back in October. At that point, we'd already had a significant portion of money on the table for biosecurity. We uplifted it again by 65 million. So there's nearly $230 million that we've specifically put towards biosecurity, and that will need to continue. And again, I'm not trying to draw the feds in on something that is about state stuff, but when we talk about planning for biosecurity, it does involve every other state, and it involves the federal government. So at the moment, New South Wales, I've got $229 million of your money on the table. The federal government's got 46, 20 of that around sheep and goat EID. So there needs to be a different conversation, I think, around how a national plan needs to work, who needs to step up to do what. As New South Wales, we have capacity because of the excellent people we have that work in the departments to make sure that we can deliver everything we need to do. Other states don't have that, and that is a shame, but we need the federal government to help uplift them. I was talking to a vet yesterday who does a lot of fly-in and fly-out work around North Queensland, Northern Territory, Alice Springs. He is petrified because of what he sees in those parts of the world and that lack of investment from the federal government. So I talk to vets like Campbell all the time about what they need and how we can, even though it's not our role, how we can help the federal government maybe get to that level. So my commitment is 100% there. Biosecurity may not be a sexy word, but it's probably just about the most important word in agriculture at the moment. We will continue to do what needs to be done.
Can I just say, Andrew, the Minister spoke about the staff. I don't think people understand or appreciate, Annabelle, just how much work the biosecurity staff do in DPI. I think we're quite fortunate in New South Wales with the group we have, and I think Scott's here. I mean, I've spoken about this in the past in Parliament. I think we have a wonderful crew in biosecurity in New South Wales, and the Varroa mite outbreak. You see what they do. And the way they call in other agencies, it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge that fantastic work that they do on behalf of New South Wales.
Thanks, Mick.
Stephen Wentworth, Feeding the Future. One of the drivers of food inflation has been the cost of transport. Given the significant damage we've seen in the last 12 months across regional and rural roads, what will you do in government, both of you, to help facilitate the funding of redevelopment, rebuilding of regional transport as a whole to try and bring down the cost of transport?
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, good question. I mean, one of the one of the things we've actually just done, is announce a new commissioner to specifically work on bottlenecks around transport supply, literally the supply chain. So a special commissioner to work with the Ag Commissioner and also make sure that any of those kinks are actually ironed out, and the Productivity Commissioner is part of that team as well. But we are also committed 100% to the Great Western Highway, for example, which is a $4.5 billion project. We've got $2.5 billion on the table, and I'll ask Mick to commit to that in a minute as well. $2.5 billion from us. We're still waiting. The feds have pulled out again, sadly, a $2 billion commitment. But we're committed to that with road, with tunnels. Have a think about how you're going to do that. But it's a commitment that is solid, and rail is the other important one. And we're committed to a statewide uplift of rail capacity, which will mean that not only faster, but linking it with inland rail, heavier axles, all of the things we need to uplift our transport to Port of Newcastle, to Port Botany and south if needed as well. Port of Newcastle is another major uplift for this state to get all sorts of containerised goods, including grain, out of that port. It's a much underutilised port, and things are freeing up for that access now. But our main commitment around some of those supply chain issues will be around that connectivity of Great Western Highway. We're there, and I'm hoping we're able to deliver on that with some federal support in the future.
Dougal, given that you haven't got support from the feds at the moment, and that there's an awful lot of road and rail infrastructure damage across the state, and you're talking about Newcastle, wouldn't it be better to say, like, we're going to put the money somewhere else? $2.5 billion. It's you haven't had to spend it yet, but maybe.
Yeah, but if you commit to a project, Andrew, and then you pull the plug, it shows that you're actually not committed to projects, and we are committed to projects. Committed to building literally life-changing projects like the tunnels and the roads across the Blue Mountains. And that goes across the state. So we've got $19 billion in pipeline for road across New South Wales. An extra $1 billion that was just announced at our campaign launch a couple of weeks ago. So that is a significant amount of money, and the extra $1 billion is to top up all of those regional programs that we need, that regional people like us love, because they deliver for councils, and that's what this is mostly about. Helping councils who aren't often capable of providing the funding themselves, providing that funding and that uplift for them. Okay. Part of that, 300 mil on betterment. So we can do things better, we have to do things better, we need to build roads better than they were in the past.
Mick, what's your view on the road, the Great Western Highway?
Okay, now just so you know, I ventured down this road on Saturday.
On
Wednesday night.
2.5 commitment.
And I think the words were, I think we have. As it turns out, the text message that I got from the Shadow Minister, which, by the way, did melt the phone, there's an announcement coming. I was just a bit preemptive, and so you'll have to wait and see what we're going to do. And I'm not venturing into that Shadow Minister's portfolio area because I want to be the Minister for Primary Industries and I want to be able to get through the election unscathed.
But do you think it's important, though, to commit to that?
Sorry?
Do you think it's important, though, to commit to that project?
I think roads right across the state, Dougal. I think there's a real issue right across the state. Look, there's been a lot of, I think I said this other night, there's been a lot of promises about the Great Western Highway. I probably don't traverse it as much as you, but I do get to Bathurst quite a bit. There's a lot of work that's got to be done along that road. And I'd be keen to see the business case on some of this. I really would be keen to see the business case.
For a while.
Okay, fellas, that's good. You've had a good fireside chat.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Go on.
On the tunnel.
If you can talk about it later. Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Pete Arkell, CEO, New South Wales Farmers. Look, obviously, 22% of New South Wales is state significant ag land that underpins 1 in every 7 export dollars for goods and merchandise from New South Wales. And we know that obviously a lot of the export drivers for New South Wales will evolve over time, most notably coal. And we see agriculture as an immense opportunity to capture some of that added value for our state. I'm just interested in what each of you would do to preserve that state significant asset so it's there for future generations. Because once we've dug up the last lump of coal, we'll still be enjoying steak from the New England, lamb from Cowra, or beer brewed from barley on the Liverpool Plains. So, I mean, what specific things would you do to protect that irreplaceable state asset?
I spoke earlier about our the Ag Commissioner and the importance of an independent statutory agricultural commissioner. I think we've got a lot of work for that particular role going into government. I'll make no bones about that, and we will draw upon the work that's already done, because I don't think we should waste that work with Darryl's work. But we've actually got to preserve agricultural land in some way. We can't keep, like, I'll use this example a lot. But I spent some time at Young. Andrew spoke earlier about the fact I was at Young Shire Council. When I was at Young Shire Council, one of the big issues back in the mid-90s was encroachment of the local town, Annabelle knows this, of the local town into the cherry orchards. Well, if you drive into Young now, they still say they're the cherry capital, but there's just nowhere near the level of cherry orchards. We've lost. So when you talk about state significant agricultural land, it's just it is things like our horticulture. It is farming land. We've got to work out how we can preserve that in a manner that it doesn't allow it to be subsumed by urban encroachment or other industrial requirements. I think the Agriculture Commissioner for us will be the way to work through that and in government. But can I just say, a lot of this is also planning, the Department of Planning, and a lot of the criticisms, and I'm certain the Minister hears this a lot as well, but wherever you go, people will pull up, farmers in particular will talk to you about either the council or the Department of Planning, and the lack of consultation or poor consultation. So there are a lot more people involved in this process than just DPI. There are other agencies, and we need to make sure that those other agencies are aware of the value of agricultural land when they're giving consideration to things.
Have you got this sorted, Dugald?
Yeah, look, and to start with, I'm actually wondering, I think you've allowed how much, 10 mil for your statutory Ag Commissioner? Right, so the Small Business Commissioner is 15? Yep, so you've got 15 over 4 years or 10 over 4 years, so I think your costings are probably significantly out. We have an Ag Commissioner that it has done, I think everyone would agree, a significantly good job in his role. So, as I mentioned earlier...
I don't disagree with that. I actually agree with the work that Darryl's done. So
look, a statutory role to me just means that you have one of the most highly regarded people in the country in this space that would be tied down in the weeds of a problem, and we've had this discussion, you and I, Peter, before. I think the role that Darryl has is the perfect role, and if you ask the Agricultural Commissioner what he thinks of that role, he thinks the role that he's doing now is perfect right now. If things change, we would always look at that. But I take advice from the bloke who's doing the job and says, this is the best use of my time right now. That could change in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. He doesn't currently believe that a statutory role for an Ag Commissioner is the right way. Having said that, he is heavily involved in everything we're doing in this space, including, as I mentioned earlier, the Farm Practices Panel. So this is exactly what that is designed to do. This is forward thinking. It's about protecting land. It's about recognising, if you're a berry grower, potato grower, sheep farmer, whatever, what your industry is, how it interacts with land, and it doesn't allow for encroachment based on those facts. So Darryl would chair that panel, but there would be other industry experts setting out the guidelines of exactly what each sector is in that area. So blueberries at Coffs Harbour or Woolgoolga or whatever, very clearly part of the landscape now. So some very clear guidelines about what that production system is and what it needs allowances for the future, as far as not encroachment and then people complaining about being near a berry farm. So we're in that space already. We are absolutely driving forward to make sure we protect what we need to.
Okay. One more question.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Andrew. Dugald, Mick. Peter Graham, North Coast dairy farmer, Vice Chairman of East Oz Milk, which spreads across New South Wales and Queensland, representing in excess of 300 dairy farmers now, and working hard to look after the rest. Throughout New South Wales in the last 12 months, probably should say the last 3 years, we've received, from all other areas, a lot of natural disasters. Dugald, you've been witnessed mine. You didn't see how deep the water was, but you definitely felt it, and felt my anguish around it. Over this last 12 months, and it's the 12-month anniversary of Lismore going under next Tuesday, we've had a lot of recovery efforts, which has cost the state an enormous amount of money, cost the individual farmer an enormous amount of money. I'd like to ask both you gentlemen, how do you see resilience for the farm sector going forward? We can't keep coming back to governments of any persuasion, state or federal. We can't keep coming back. The wider community are saying, why are we throwing all this money at farmers? We're continually throwing money at farmers. We say thank you as a farmer, but to say and keep the community on side, we need to be more resilient. So how do you, gentlemen, see that going forward?
Good on you. Thank you. Nice to see you here today. I hadn't noticed you. And look, I have been on your farm and we spent a bit of time there gazing over what was a beautiful part of the world, but obviously at certain times was pretty devastating. I've spent a lot of time in the Northern Rivers over the past year, and unfortunately for all the wrong reasons due to disaster, not because things were going well. I've been in a room with beef cattle producers crying, dairy producers, blokes that have lost their herds, as a river swept their cattle away. And you're one of them. It's hard. It's bloody hard. Resilience to me is being there to support people, but having a plan for the future. And part of the plan and part of the reason that we tried to, as quickly as possible, not just get people on the ground to be there to listen through rural financial counsellors or, our other DPI support networks or LLS, was to actually try and provide a way of funding things so that it was staggered and that people didn't get a big whack of money and not sure what to do. So that's a continuation of a process in disaster recovery. There's nothing ever perfect about how that works, as you are well aware, but it's an attempt to make people feel like they have support and some options there for their future. The resilience part comes after that, and in recovery is where you build resilience. And resilience might include for dairy farmers, and I think you and I have talked about it. I've talked about it at a town hall meeting with South Coast dairy farmers, and then been on individual farms talking about what resilience looks like for them. Is it a raised feed pad? Is it not using conventional fencing but using electrics? Is it changing where the shed is and the milking shed is? Is it actually selling half their property and doing something else and becoming resilient by extension of another industry on the property? So we have a range of ways that I want to see people being resilient, because the resilience now isn't just making enough silage or hay or having enough silos to store grain and hay. That's not resilience anymore. We think about resilience like that for drought, but when we talk about the space we are in now, it's natural disaster. So fire, flood, drought, whatever it is, we need more than just you need to store this much feed. So, part of the resilience team that we build through DPI is around all of those wraparound services. It includes everything that is needed, and it involves on-ground workers like local land services as well. So part of the plan is investing more money into ongoing resilience, which is ongoing looking at your business planning, what your business is, has been, what you want it to be, because people change. So we need to support that. Look at us. I mean, completely different backgrounds. Here we are together today talking to you. Things change all the time, and we need to be able to adapt to all of the things around us, including what our current patch of land looks like. So,
Mick, would you like to have a closing word on that?
Yeah, can I? It's a very good question. Not a lot of people are aware, but where I grew up, the Duns Road bushfire started at the house near the house where I grew up, and most of the people I went to school with who now got their family farms, they were burnt out. I've sat with those families a couple of times to have a conversation around resilience, and one of them said to me that, and this is no offence, but he said to me he's actually sick of the word resilience being used, because he thinks it's actually capacity. It's more to do with capacity, and so, and I'm happy to have discussions with people about that. But I think outside of the word, Dugald's right. Things like support really important leading into and post an event. The farmers in the Ellerslie Valley near Duns Road are now looking at a whole range of things. There was some opportunities arose for some of them, and there's exclusion fencing going in now because they had a chance to do that for some of them. I'm concerned about sort of getting too involved in people's operations, because the Minister's right, everyone's operation is different, and what you do with that operation in some way should be supported by a range of mechanisms. We go through a review after every event, every flood or fire. There's always some sort of a review and inquiry. There's always lessons to be learned. Sometimes I wonder whether we actually do learn the lessons, and I do wonder sometimes whether we go about it in the right way. But I went to Canada to look at their insurance scheme over there, which is it's sort of come out, for those that don't know, it came out of the 1930s Dust Bowl, and so the provinces put money in, or the states, the Commonwealth over there puts money in, and producers put money in towards a levy, and it provides there's a range of sort of mechanisms within that insurance process, and essentially it was set up so that it was to provide a bit of a level and to stop governments having to put so much money in straight after an event of some description.
So is that the sort of thing you're looking at?
I've publicly said I think there should be discussions around what that looks like. I got drowned out by a whole heap of people saying we shouldn't be heading down that path. But again, they learn a lesson. I'm not sure why we shouldn't go and see what are there elements of that we could apply. We may not be able to do the same model, but look, I think the solutions may well be there by looking at what others are doing. So, I'm happy to have that conversation with anyone that wants to talk to me about it.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. To the Minister and Shadow Minister, thank you very much, and please thank Andrew and our guests. We have a Minister who thinks he's got the best job in the world and a Shadow Minister who thinks he has 9 lives. Yes. So if you are so minded, he did, what do you point out? Number 9, look under the line, number 1 to 15, and maybe one of those will see Mick. And I agree with the Minister that it would be a great shame if Mick was not returned to Parliament, because there are far too few people in Parliament with the life experience of somebody like Mick Veitch. So it's probably the nicest thing I've ever said about a Labor politician, Mick. So
I think he's calling you old, actually.
and it's on camera too. So
can we just get a clipping of that recording?
Yeah. Look, from jobs and skills to agricultural land use, land care, biosecurity, the cost of transport and infrastructure, state significant agriculture land, and probably the question of the day on farm sector resilience. I was actually thinking this has been more of a love-in than a debate. And as good as, I think that really demonstrates the important role that agriculture plays in the state of New South Wales. And I think it's a testament to our 2 chief political parties that they don't treat this sector as a political football. We've heard from both of them today, have made a series of commitments, and I'm sure everybody in this room will hold them to it. It's all on film. So whether we are here again in 4 years' time with Minister/Shadow Minister Mick Veitch and Minister or Shadow Minister Dugald Saunders, we know they are great friends of farm riders, and we thank them very much. And again, please thank them for their time today.